Normally, GMs are stronger than feeder masters. Now, in today's video, as you're seeing on my screen, I am the higher rated opponent. And my GM friend here, I was absolutely crushed by my shoe. So, with no further ado, we'll be learning exactly what we need to do to be crushing GMs more often. And let's get right into this video. Going into a deep dive. So my opponent played knight to f3 and here I played knight to f6. Now the higher rated you are in chess, you're not going to be afraid to play chess. Like, you don't need any tricks, any traps, just chess, guys. You're like relying purely on skill. So he played g3 and I played g6. So everybody who watches my channel knows that I love the King's Indian defense. And what's happening is that I am putting my bishop on this long diagonal, and it's going to be very hard to contest that bishop if he doesn't do it by himself. I'm going to be explaining this later down. So he's also doing this with his bishop. And why is this important? No, it's not a must. Like, you can actually just play chess randomly and everything is okay. Now, the difference between the bishop being on e2 and on g2 is that it has access to a lot more squares in your opponent's half of the board. So example, the bishop being on e2, if he just developed the bishop normally, it would just be looking at like a knight, or it's just chilling, guys. When you feign shatter the bishop, you are getting the possibility of just cutting the entire board in half. And this helps with more long-term prospects with chess. When pawn to c4. And the reason why I normally recommend that you control the center with pawns, it's simply this. When a pawn controls a square, guys, it can only be contested with another pawn. Like, a piece can't go there, right? Like, when a pawn says that it wants a square, that's it. You either like leave it, or you have to actually contest it with another pawn. So pawn centers are super solid once you don't overextend. But here I played this move pawn to d6, and this is still book. I don't want you guys to even think of book depending on like your level, but it's just principles, guys. Like theory, it's principles. Just That's what I'm looking for. It's gonna be better. Like, it's like you're gonna be playing like your natural moves, yes, but here, when with like theory, you can actually get a little bit more creative with where your pieces go long term. Now, with natural moves, you would just get like your bishop out normally, your knight out normally. With theory, you can start playing like some weird stuff, like putting your knight on the side of the board, and it will be justified. But you want to master the principles of chess first. When pawn to d4. So this is the difference, guys. It's still book, but look, when a beginner does this, let's say that they finish to their bishop and they don't know what's happening, and they start breaking principles left and right. When it's time to actually revert back to standard stuff, like really getting your pieces out, they have completely lost their minds and everything goes or becomes chaotic. Now, with professionals, when they break principles, they understand when they're actually just like biting off too much, and they can just revert back to chess. So here my opponent is doing back the same thing. He's like, all right, I still have to control the center. I still have to get my minor pieces developed, because he only has two developed currently, and he already has king safety. So we're still going for those three things. Now for me, I have my king safe and I only have two minor pieces developed. So even though I'm playing opening theory, I'm like, all right, I have to get back to principle. So I played knight to c6. Now for persons here, if they don't know what they're doing, they just start panicking. If I'm like looking at persons' games and here they're like already seeing ghosts and they're pulling moves like pawn to h6, telling me that they're going to be preparing for like avoiding bishops from getting in, or trying to free up their back rank in the future. You're already losing it, guys. You're in the opening, focus on opening stuff. So knight to c6 and now knight to c3. We're simply just doing regular or random stuffs. Now he is planning to put another pawn in the center. I don't think he's gonna do it, but just in general, my bishop from c8 normally goes to the f5 square to access some squares in his half of the board. And this is where the battle begins. Now, I want you guys to really like sit and take this in. Like here, is there any move from both sides that you could not have played in this scenario? So all I'm doing is getting my pieces out and castling my king. Same thing for white. It's just a case where we're like mixing it up. So at the lower levels, a lot of blunders happen. So but like you're gonna be winning by blunders. At the higher levels, it's not so easy for your opponents to go wrong. So you have to maneuver the pieces in like a little manner to actually throw them off their guard. Now here, my opponent, if you guys are playing this, if you guys are with the white pieces, you can play normal moves. You can play b3 and finish your development. Nothing will happen to you. If you get like your bishop out to a normal square, nothing will happen to you. When you break principles, understand that what you're taking on is extreme risk. Now, the higher you go up in chess, you will know when and when not to break principles. But if you don't know what you're doing, just stick to principles, guys, and everything is going to be okay. Now here my opponent played pawn to d5, and I want you guys to even try to think about what is the drawback of this move. With all my King's Indian videos, what happens when white normally puts his pawn on d5? It does two things. It is allowing my bishop on g7 to get really serious access along this diagonal. So if you're playing these moves and you're not understanding the reasons behind why you're doing so, you're gonna get outplayed. It's simply put. The second drawback behind this move is the fact that he is blocking out his bishop that is on g2. So he has just worsened his g2 bishop and activated my bishop. So why is Stockfish saying that this is bug? This is where your chess understanding needs to come into play. Now, for this opening in particular, he can actually free that diagonal open by force. He can do it by force. Now here, do we go back or do we go forward? Now everybody who has watched my videos knows like this common theme, which is the reason why like when you're doing opening preparations again, you're going to start to see common things repeating over and over again, which is where you can actually become a specialist on a certain opening. So here, it's the middle game. What do we do in the middle game? We are looking for piece optimization, as in I'm looking to get my pieces up the board. Like any piece that I see that looks a little passive, I'm trying to give it maximum work. So here, knight to a5 is putting pressure on the c4 pawn, and he already starts the battle. He played now knight to f5. With your chess understanding, rely on your skills, guys. What is worth more, a knight or a bishop? Now, in general, a bishop is worth more than a knight, especially in open positions. So all I did was not allow him to get this piece. Brought the bishop back to d7. And he played b3 and protected the pawn on c4. Now, I'm going to even break this down a little bit more for you. Now, what happens when persons deviate from like natural looking moves? They basically get like extremely greedy and bad things happen to them. Now, with GMs, understand that they're seeing more moves ahead. So if they're giving you pawns, like let's say this pawn on c4, you need to actually check your moves 3 moves deep. So let's say that you're about to take a pawn. There's going to be some things in which you can't see, right? But when it comes down to tactics, whenever I'm creating loose pieces, and what do I mean by this? I am putting a piece on an unprotected square. This is where I start looking for tactics from my opponents. Like example, he could take my light square bishop and play this move, queen to d3. Suddenly, he's attacking my unprotected piece on f5 and the pawn, sorry, on c4 and my pawn on f5. So whenever you have unprotected pieces in chess, it is a possibility where tactics might become available. So for that he was attacking my bishop, I simply brought it back to d7. But it's also something you can keep in mind whenever you are feeling that, the position can become tactical. So bishop to d7, he played no b3, protecting the pawn on c4. And now my opponent is planning to finish his opening phase of the game and complete his development. Now, this is also what I was telling you guys earlier, where this bishop is really, really good on this diagonal. So he's planning to put a bishop there for himself to compete with that bishop on g7. Now, this entire video is going to be more about your chess understanding than just, again, playing moves and trying to get like decent positions. Now, I played pawn to c5. I'm trying to kick pieces off this diagonal. So the more active my pieces look, the more likely my opponent is going to get outplayed. Remember, if your pieces start to get better than your opponents, you're going to start pushing his pieces back. This is what we aim for in chess. At the higher levels, blunders are not like all the time. Like, it still happens, but it's not as often as like what happens at like the 500 levels. You're gonna have to like force it from your opponents. Now here he took, knight takes, and again this is still all book, but realize that him playing the move pawn to d5 earlier didn't really affect him, because all of this is a forced variation where he gets his bishop back out naturally. So he understands this. He understands that he can break principles, but it will not hurt his position too much because he has already done his preparation. For lower levels, it doesn't really matter. You can just play normal moves and things just happen normally. Like, this is a GM, guys, meaning this is the final boss of chess. He needs preparation to actually get some decent positions. So here, knight takes c6, and now bishop to b2, and he has officially completed the opening phases of the game. Now, this is where the thought process for your games are going to come in handy. Now, what are we looking for in the middle game? Now, remember, the middle game begins the minute we have like some center control, our minor pieces out, like is our two knights and the two bishops, and our king has officially gotten safety. Minor pieces out, king safety, some center control. This is officially your green light for the middle game. And for the middle game, we're simply improving your pieces, guys. Like, can't get any simpler. Improve the pieces. If you don't see a way to get your pieces involved in the game, look for your pawn breaks to help activate your pieces. So here, moves like rook to c8 should come to mind. And why? A rook on a8 is temporarily out of the game, and you can think of pieces that are not doing anything. It's not even participating, it is spectating. You don't want to have spectators, you want to have actual players in the game. So rook to c8, that is another move. What other piece is on like a passive square that could actually get some activity? My queen moved from d8 to a5, and I'm now putting pressure on my opponent's side of the board. Now, this is how you set up tactics. Tactics don't just fall out of the sky, guys. Like, you can't have all your pieces on the back rank not attacking anything, and then you're like looking for tactics. You're like, why isn't my puzzle rating showing in my chess games? Because you're not even giving yourselves a chance to find a tactic with your passive positions. So here, queen to a5 is putting pressure on my opponent. He played queen to d2, and you guys know how I play chess. I like to swing pieces to my opponent's king side. Now, this is how you get like super aggressive positions. Now here, Stockfish doesn't really like the move. This is good news. Sometimes, if Stockfish doesn't like a move and it's still okay, it probably means that the GM doesn't have this prepared. And this is showing me a huge part in this man's gameplay where he makes his first mistake. And you guys know this from way back, like to take is a mistake, guys. So he played now knight takes c6 and allowed this imbalance in the position. Now, this is what the higher rated persons use to outplay persons in games. I told you when your pieces start to become better than your opponents, and this one in particular where there's like an imbalance. When there's absolute symmetry, it's a lot harder to outplay. When there's an imbalance, you can actually start swinging pieces to better squares. Now, what do I mean by this? What happened with this exchange? And did it benefit White's position or did it worsen White's position? This is what I need you guys to ask yourself whenever you trade. Now, by keeping this on the board, if I took the knight on d5, d4, the queen gets into the game. On a general basis, you don't want to practice this. By him taking, he has just opened the B file for my pieces, and this can actually haunt him. We're going to be covering this more in the game. He now went knight to e4, and by him making no natural moves, bad things are going to happen. Now, what I also explained to you guys in the middle game is, remember, you need piece optimization and your pawn breaks. Now, if you're looking closely at this position, it's very hard for White to actually squeeze a pawn break in, and it is equal material. Black, on the other hand, is looking to play a5 and d4. Currently, it's not possible because he has a knight on the c3 square, stopping that pawn from getting down the board. If you guys are playing this with the white pieces, I expect normal play. I expect rook to d1, just breaking a piece into the game naturally. Just things that are okay, but this GM was fixed on like trades and played knight to e4, and so said, so done, guys. Look at this. I took, bishop takes, took, queen takes. Now, to put this really slow, all I did was remove the pieces off the board, right? And what's left is what we call the pawn structure, the pawns which dictate like the piece play. So this is gonna be like super advanced stuff, but nonetheless, I'm just putting it out there for like advanced viewers and intermediate players. Beginners can really learn from this as well if they want to, again, just improve their chess understanding. Now, how can black be better in this position? Like, what is happening? How is white getting outplayed here? Now, it's not a case where white is losing or anything, but it is going to be easier to make moves for black. And remember, in chess, you want to be the side that has the cards, the side that is putting the pressure on your opponent. In chess, we call this the two result type of play, meaning either black is going to win this or it's going to draw. Now, for anybody below like 1,000, this rule doesn't apply to you. There is plenty of room for you guys to blunder, but I now play this move pawn to a5. And remember, either piece activity, pawn breaks. This is not supposed to be the only move you see, guys. Moves that come to mind as a candidate, meaning you're never supposed to be in the middle game and you're like, I can't find anything to play. After hearing this, you need to look for, if I was, again, I was black, in other words, like you look at the board and you're like, all right, piece improvement, bishop to h3, that move can come to your mind. Bishop to g4, that move can come to your mind. Just like something putting pressure in your opponent's half of the board. You could look for pawn breaks, pawn to f5 followed by pawn to f4. Not saying that these are good moves. I am just giving you guys plans, ideas. If you can't improve a piece, look for a pawn break. Pawn to d5 is also a pawn break. It is putting tension between pawns on the board. It doesn't matter how complex your games look. If you want to break it down, just let me know. I can help you. But in general, just understand that in chess, by improving your chess understanding, looking out for these, you will indeed improve. So here we play pawn to a5 and I have rooks. Rooks need open lines, guys. So the more files I have in my favor on the board, it's going to be very difficult for my opponent to play on. He now went pawn to a4, and let's see who is paying attention. So why is my opponent playing pawn to h4? For viewers, I don't expect anybody to get it, which is why I am talking to it slowly. My opponent GMs, every single person who is like somewhat of a master, they look for their pawn breaks, guys. Now, what he's planning is simply playing bishop back to f3 and pushing this pawn to h5. He's trying to find a pawn break for some pieces. Now, I'm going to even take a detour here for like a small sec, just to show you how easy you can actually get outplayed once you start playing passive. So he played h4. This is a plan for white that if black isn't careful, he just gets outplayed. Let's say now I just move something random like my rook. Alright, let's say that he goes bishop to f3. I move, he goes h5, and what's happening here is that he could start moving like his king to g7, swinging rooks to the h file. So he created a pawn break, and then suddenly his rook can get active on the h file. I won't go too much in detail with this as not as yet, just not too much in detail, but just to show you a general plan for chess in general. So h4, this is how persons are thinking. I know when rook to b8 to put pressure on the b file, and he went queen to c3. Now this is what really surprised me the most about my opponent. He was playing a lot of reactive chess and making bad trades. Now I am threatening pawn to a4. He simply got his queen off that file, and now rook to a7. Now I am planning to push pawn to a4, but if I do this, he's gonna play pawn to b4, and guess what? I have accomplished nothing. I want to push my pawns down the board to open files. If I am putting pawns down the board to open files and he's closing it, it is a lost cause. So rook to a7. I think engine wants rook to b7 for like the same thing, just to double the rooks this way, but it's gonna come down to the same plan. So he now went bishop to f3 to talk about the plan we were dealing with earlier, and now queen to b4. This is the benefit again, guys, of putting your pieces or keeping your pieces on active squares. Now, why did I play queen to c5? I am looking to put the pawn on a4. I was planning to double up before and push the pawn this way, but by my queen stopping the b4 push, I again can actually play this move, pawn to a4. So he's unable to push, guys. Just to show you what this looks like, if I push pawn to here, he is unable to push past because I have two defenders on that b4 pawn. So here he played this move, rook to b1, and this is what I mean when I say that you can actually start having your pieces outplaying your opponent's pieces. Which rook would you choose? This b8 rook or that b1 rook? Now this again is super advanced. This one is just for like really advanced players. Like, you want general understanding of chess in terms of planning. This is just a deep dive. I won't be making too much on this. I could like put this in like private videos, but in general, just want you guys on, like, for persons who watch me on YouTube to understand what's up. So here we now doubled on the B file. This is going to throw a lot of persons off. Why is the engine recommending bishop to f5 and allowing pawn to e4? We're going to be covering this later on in the game as well, which is again understanding how pieces can actually get outplayed in chess. Bishop, we have the same piece, guys. Like, he has a bishop, I have a bishop. The more pawns he's putting on light squares, he's giving me targets in the future. He's blocking out his bishop. Realize that all the engine did was provoke white to kill his own bishop. Like, keep it passive. Now went rook to b2, and now pawn to a4. Now I literally doubled my rooks, put my queen on c5. I did everything to play this move pawn to a4. This engine wanted to wait some more and play this move pawn to h5 before actually crashing through with this move. Now again, my opponent was playing a lot of reactive chess, which really aided me in getting the victory for this match. He could have actually still continued with pawn to a5 and get his plans going, but in the game he played rook to b1. And take notes, no reactive chess, guys. I simply took, pawn takes, and now I am looking towards the endgame. So queen to b4. Now, bro, I'm telling you, queen to a3 is like a very serious move. Yes, I'm supposed to also play this as well. It is getting more space in my opponent's camp, but in the game I settled for queen to b4, and he traded. So what do we have here? We have a very passive rook. So remember earlier on in this game where we had like the rooks, like one was passive, two rooks putting pressure active. The more you trade the active pieces of white off the board, all that is going to be left for black is passive pieces. So here we have this. We have an active rook versus passive rook. What white needs to be doing in this scenario is getting this rook off the board, like in terms of like active. I know played bishop to f5, and now I played pawn to c5, just to ensure that these pawns are fixed on light squares. Now remember, bishops, I want to put this like super clear. Like the more pawns your opponent has on the same color square as his bishop, the bishop is going to be turning into a super bad piece in the endgame, especially because all it's going to be doing is defending pawns. It has no aggressive rules, no attacking potential. Now you went bishop back to c2, and this is to activate the rook. So he is really looking to get his pieces active. Now I played bishop to f5, e4, the same reason, guys. I am trying to put the bishop on the same color square as all his pawns. And then I played, oops, let me just go back. And then I played this move, bishop to e6. So it's the same plan was happening earlier in the game. It's just now taking full effect. His bishop is now a portable pawn, a spectator, and white is now taking the opportunity to activate his rook. Now, for everybody who watches my channel, we are officially in the in the end game. What is the most important piece in the end game, guys? What is the most important piece? The king. So king, and you can literally see the pathway. It's just clear, guys. Like the king is the boss in the end games, guys. Like, you just walk the king and the game is done. Now, this is GM level, which is why I won't be covering much GM games on this channel. Like for persons to understand what GMs are doing, it's gonna be like super crazy because they're limited blunders and a lot of strategic play. So just let me know in the comments what you guys think, and we're gonna get right into it. So I know I've rook to a7 and now king f6. My king is now ready to fight this endgame. So we're even seeing the endgame principles against a grandmaster, guys. Like this is 100% bulletproof. Now he played f4. He's now stopping my king from getting access to the future into his half of the board. f4. Pawns help. Again, like when a pawn says it's controlling a square, guys, it means it is controlling the square. Now bishop to g4. I am putting pieces in my opponent's half. Like remember, in chess, you need to really prioritize piece activity. Pieces play chess, and that is just point blank. So bishop to g4, king to f2, and now king to e6. This again, remember guys, he is a grandmaster. We will not just win a piece and win the game. We have to squeeze this like an orange juice. So king to e6, and we're going to again learn in this position how is this going to be crushing for black in a sec. Remember, he has passive pieces. Bishops, this bishop is getting contested with that bishop. I also have my rook on b4, putting pressure on the b2 pawn. You know, when king to e3, Engine wants to start playing crazy chess with pawn to e5, king to e3. The general idea of endgames, persons at my level really look to get king activity, piece activity, get everything out, and attacking weak pawns. So Here I played h5. I was looking at putting f5 already, but I just played this move h5 to really fix down white's pawn structure. And here, I don't know why that keeps like blocking out, but here my opponent chose to lash out. He played e5, and this is what we call tricks and traps. He expects me to take on e5. Like, remember, we have like 2 attackers on the pawn. He only has 1 defender. If we take, then he is going to take this pawn on e7. I could even show you guys what it looks like. That is in slow motion, and rook takes e7, and my pawns are falling. What did I do instead is I realized that there was a super weak pawn on b3, and I chose to remove the guard. Now, this is simply watching the b3 pawn and removing the defender of that piece. Took it. I played pawn takes, and this is where things get interesting. He took on d6. Now the engine wants for him to really like sacrifice the pawn and just play chess that way. With a passive rook on a3, it's not something that my opponent really wished for, and took on d6. Now here, this is what we call an intermezzo in chess. Now an intermezzo, or in-between move, is a move you play before playing the obvious. Now the obvious move in this scenario is this move, pawn takes d6. But instead, what happens is we play the intermezzo, rook takes b3, and then you play pawn takes d6 after. So by playing the intermezzo, we're now up material. We're up a clean pawn in this game, and this is how we're going to be converting this position. Now remember, like, my opponent could have played a lot better in the game, but this is how, like, chess played perfectly is a draw. If he's starting to like make mistakes and inaccuracies, we're going to start capitalizing, and this is how we're going to be winning our games. So went rook to h8, trying to keep the rook active, and let us see again what you guys would have been playing in this scenario. I just simply attacked the c pawn. He went for my pawn and takes. We're going to have what we call now the rat race, the pawn race. Now pass pawns are super important in endgames. So if you have pass pawns in chess, ensure that you're getting them up the board. I played rook to d4 just to keep this king at bay. Looking at this even more, I could have actually played rook to e4. Now, rooks in general are it finds it very difficult to stop 2 pass pawns. So by me having the 2 connected pass pawns against this lone rook, I would have had like a clean, clear game. But I did the same thing with rook to d4, just trying to get my pawn down the board and keeping this king cut off. Went rook check, and as you can see, I have limited time in this scenario, and I played this move king to d7, still winning the game, but a little bit, yeah, I mean, like king e7, yes, was better. So here, king d7 and h5. And now we're having the pawn race down the board. We now have pawn to c4, rook to f6, and king to e7 now. So what's happening is that the rook can't get back to this pawn, so it's just going to push down the board and queen. So we're now having the race, and this is the final piece to this puzzle, guys. Now here in chess, remember, checks captures threats, and right here it is a mate in 3. Can you find it? You can pause the video. I'll be showing it right now. So mate in 3, pause here. Can you find it? So rook to d2, queen to d1, just simply giving a check. The king only has 1 square, and then checkmate on d2. So this is how the Grandmaster lost. And thanks again for watching, guys. Subscribe for more videos like this. Hope you guys are taking notes, and see you again another time.